And so, Jeff, this is an area that you have a background in as well. Could you speak a little bit more to that concept? Because it was completely new to me, but now that I've had a bit of exposure to it, it absolutely makes sense that we do want to make websites more accessible.
Absolutely. And this is a particular area of focus of mine. It's been that way for a really long time. As you mentioned, there are, depending on where you are, if you're in Ontario in Canada, there's the Ontarians with Disabilities Act, the OADA. There is something called Section 508 in the US, and a number of other pieces of legislation that actually require any web platform or digital communication platform, so it could be an app or things like that, that interacts with the public must be accessible to those, to everyone, basically, no matter how they choose to access it. So, most of us who have, good sight and good hearing and good mobility and dexterity are able to browse with a computer or a touchpad or things like that, and kind of access these platforms. But if you're blind, for example, you might actually use a screen reader that speaks to you, but you have to be able to navigate that. And you might do so with a keyboard. You might do so with a braille reader. You might do so with your iPhone. Actually has all kinds of really interesting assistive technology built in. And in order for those disabled people, which depending on where you're talking about could be anywhere between 13 and 25% of the population. So, if you're thinking about our customers, our clients' customers, there's most definitely, at least 10 to 20% of the people they're dealing with have some form of disability impacting their ability to access the web. So if you don't code in a certain way and you don't consider these things as you're putting something together, then you potentially create a massive roadblock for people. And that may be as simple as not being able to listen to this podcast. But if you are deaf, maybe you can read the transcript instead, which is why you provide transcripts. It's why we provide transcripts, different alternatives of media, depending on how people are going to access things. So this sort of idea of universal access, like, having a ramp into your restaurant and accessibly wide doors so that wheelchairs can get through to go to the bathroom and things like that. Those are all part of the same concept. But there are guidelines for this, and we really focus on ensuring that all of the platforms that we build and the people that we advise are implementing they're called the WCAG guidelines, WCAG guidelines, and we're in version 2.2 now. It's something that is kind of argued over by a committee of designers and developers and communication professionals around the world, and kind of these standards are implemented that way. And I became particularly interested in this. I have a daughter who's 20, or going to be 20. Actually, this company was founded a week after she was born.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I got laid off and decided I didn't want to work for anybody else. So, but she, when she was little, she had a ton of ear issues, and it got to the point where she had, I believe, 9 surgeries on her ears in about 3 years. And it was pretty clear that she was going to completely lose the hearing in one ear and potentially lose part of her hearing in another ear. And it just really crystallized for me the importance of ensuring that the things that we create for people, are actually available to anybody, no matter how they consume them, no matter what they're going to, face personally. That we shouldn't stand in their way of helping them understand products, or helping them, utilize the web or access services and things like that. And I will say, thankfully, there was one later surgery that we realized that she wouldn't actually lose her hearing, which was quite wonderful. Now she just pretends she can't hear me. That's a very different conversation.
Selective.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, it really, kind of experiencing that firsthand and sort of seeing the things that could stand in their way really cements why this is a super important thing, to make sure everything's accessible to everybody.
We actually have quite a few of our listeners who are entrepreneurs. So would that be the first place for them to go check out, would be those guides if they've just created, I think a lot of people have their own WordPress websites, that sort of thing. And if they're just trying to become more aware of what they can do, would that be the best starting point?
I think that they may find that a little opaque.
Okay.
But if you do Google kind of an accessibility checker or something like that, you can usually
Mhm.
run your website URL through them, and they'll tell you where some of the problems might lie. And then a lot of the WordPress templates have this baked in now. It's a much more common thing than it was 10 years ago, and certainly, WordPress is starting from a very good place when it comes to
Okay.
having accessible sites. But yeah, usually those kind of online systems will test it and tell you where the problem areas might be, and then you can bring that to your web partner and have them implement them. Or
And if it's for entrepreneurs that maybe aren't doing that with a web partner, it'll at least let you know the most offensive things that might be taking place that you might need to fix. Quite often it's just simply like, people aren't putting alt text on images correctly, or they're,
Yeah.
just like kind of easy fixes, or there's just kind of something they've done foolishly around contrast because their eyes are fine, so they don't think that it's a
Yes.
contrast issue, but it may fail accessibility guidelines. So there often are just easier fixes, I think, for those types of listeners that are
Okay.
thinking, oh, what's going on? Maybe I should be a
what
little
about the
concerned
code?
about that. And then, on the other side of it is, if you have, corporate listeners that are listening in on this, I would just say, like, don't dismiss it.
Hmm.
It's like there's not one damn company out there that would get in an argument with you about having an accessible entrance to their main
Yeah,
office, or
you're right.
disabled parking spots, or what have you. They wouldn't even think twice about it. But then the minute you talk to them about spending an extra $10,000 on their website because it should be accessible to everybody, they start to balk. And Jeff has
Mm.
done that. We kind of late in the podcast to bring this up, but we own a second agency called What We Make It, which does service design for governments and public sector.
Hmm.
So and that's where, I mean, of course, if you're designing digital services to be deployed to a citizen population,
Yeah.
accessibility is even more critical. And some of the
Yeah.
accessibility testing that Jeff has led in that space, I really wish people could see it, and see what other people have to experience, and then they wouldn't be complaining about the extra money on a website to make it accessible. That's for sure.
Oh, and to see the joy when somebody using one of those devices is just, this is exactly how it's supposed to work. I can get everywhere. I understand where I am. It all makes sense.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
same kind
Yeah.
of thing that we all experience generally when we access the web, it's not always there.
It's not
You know, we,
weird parallel to social media. It's easier to, you know, be an arsehole to somebody on social media or what have you, because it's nameless, faceless, and you can just rage tweet or whatever, or rage X or
Mhm.
whatever they call it, post. I don't know. Anyway, probably the same thing. I think it's not like these people are bad people. It's just that it's they don't have to see the impact of their decision as much.
Yeah.
Well, and often it's coming from a place of ignorance. It's not necessarily that
Yeah.
they're choosing to block people out. They just don't even know it's a thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, often you hear in the corporate world that you call your website your front door to your business. But that's why I love that analogy that you had of the ramp, the entrance ramp, because if you don't have that entrance ramp to the front door of your business, you're absolutely right that you're going to be, and it's a business decision too. You're going to be limiting yourself from this whole other customer base. That's fascinating. I feel like we could do a whole other podcast on that topic.